Welcome all to this public meeting of the board. I'm Paul Oakes, I'm the Trust Chair. Very nice to see everyone here, including very nice to see a number of folk online. So welcome Lewis and Patrick to this public meeting. Welcome Katie as board member, but who's a little bit snowbound, so she's joining us indirectly. Welcome also to the governors who are attending here this morning, to Keith and Anna. Good to see you all. What have we got? We've got a couple of apologies, Paul Downer and Margaret Lowe, and we've got a good array of public here, for which thank you very much indeed. Can I check? The agenda looks okay? Nothing major you want to add in? No major, any other businesses? No? Okay. All looks fine. Because there's lots of decent meaty stuff in there, let's just clear the less exciting stuff early, shall we? So we've got, declarations of interest. Anybody got anything they need to add? No? Okay. Minutes to the last, look pretty good to me. Happy to approve the minutes. Yeah, good, nobody's flagging up. And the action log, that's nice and neat, isn't it, the action log? It's got one action to propose a way of promoting awareness of the role of non-execs. Wasn't it a good video, that Richard did? Yeah. Well done to Richard and well done to Ross and colleagues. A classy operation all round, and very good to see that. I've got nothing else advising in terms of actions. Are we all good to move on? And if so, we're on already to Jim's update, Chief Executive.
Thanks, Paul. So it is very much, largely a continuation of previous months. Strong performance overall relative to the rest of the NHS, but really still not fully managing to get where we want to be. It's worth pointing out the ED stat there, 87.9. This report covers a period where we're really starting to see extra pressure and tension in the system, which has continued, still continues with some slight improvement this week. So it's going to be a very, very hard quarter. There's a lot of things going on to make sure that with regard to winter we're doing what we can in terms of decompressing that situation, taking care of the staff where we can, really focus on safety in key times of extremis, with a mind for what it's going to be like in that key point in between Christmas and New Year. But broadly, the statistics are very consistent with the previous reports and very strong position overall. In terms of the agenda, usual very significant proportion of the agenda is focused on what this is like for patients and staff. And in our patient story, probably one of our first real attempts to try and have a proper discussion about something that hasn't gone really entirely well, with quite a lot of learning. I think that's a really healthy process. It will be uncomfortable. It's always difficult to do this, but it's really important we'll learn from that as well as the things that do go well. So happy to take any questions if there are.
Thank you. Questions, comments to Jim? Of course, we had a pre-run of much of this with the governors last night. Anything more at this point? Some of this we'll also be revisiting later on today in the private report. Good. This was the last time Jim was presented to a public board meeting. I'm not about to make a fuss about it, because there's too many last times coming up in this period that it would be perverse not to at least note that. Okay. Then let's go on in, and as Jim flagged up, patient and staff stories, I've been encouraging, as you know, for not only to focus on the good news, but to recognise that we live in the real world and some things don't always go right. So the patient and staff stories, Joe's here. Do you want to take us into this?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to bring both the staff and patient stories to the board today. As both yourself and Jim said, I think it's really important that we bring balanced stories. So, there's some great practice that happens in the organisation and some really excellent patient experience. But we know that sometimes that isn't always the case, and we would always strive to improve that. So discussions such as this help that. And one of the things I would hope to do today is also give assurance to the board about some of the work that's being done in respect of this story. So we've got two stories today. They're from a ward in our emergency care hospital. One story is from a family member who was an unpaid carer for a patient on the ward, and the staff story comes from one of the trainee nursing assistants on the ward. If I can, I'll start with the staff story. So this lady describes her love of her role, her career progression, and I think it's a really great example of how people can have a career progression, not through the classic route, so an apprenticeship and then being able to become a trainee nurse associate. And this role specifically is being designed to support a patient-centred approach to care and provides an academic learning alongside on-the-job training. I think she speaks beautifully about how passionate she is about the role and what her drive is to do that. I think she is honest in terms of some of the challenges she faces with the on-the-job training. So Jim mentioned before the pressures that we can face in the NHS on our wards, and I think sometimes she describes that in the way that it can be difficult to take those opportunities for on-the-job learning versus providing the personal care that she really wants to when they're feeling the pressure on the ward. However, she does talk about how her coping mechanisms and her resilience and how she manages those real pressurised times. And I love the way she says, I just take a breath and I carry on with my kindness. And I just thought that was beautiful. So I thought it was an honest insight, but also a real insight into the passion and compassion that our staff have for the roles that they do. So moving on to the patient story. So as I said, this is a family member who is a carer. And I think there's both positives and negatives. I think for me, this story really underpins the role, the extremely important role that carers play in the partnership of the care of patients on our ward, that they are the expert of their family member or the important person that they care for. They understand their needs, they understand the consistency of routine, and we can see that throughout the story. So I think from a positive perspective, the things that the family member describes as being able to stay on the ward with the patient, so to be able to advocate for the patient, to share what's important, to share what needs to happen around routine. I think the unfortunate thing is sometimes we've seen that hasn't happened on this occasion. So they describe that, particularly at the beginning of the process, they felt unlistened to on the ward. So some of the examples that they used to demonstrate that was asking that conversations didn't happen in front of the family member, because that would cause uncertainty, unrest, and they knew as the expert of that their loved one that actually that would not be helpful. So it took some time for that to happen. There was an issue around the food, so the patient has the type 2 diabetes and they were given the incorrect food, which the family member was obviously able to highlight straight away. And they do say, what about people who haven't got carers like, such as me? And I think that's, not only are they thinking of themselves, they're thinking of other patients. They really advocate for the documents which we do use routinely on our ward, the patient passport and the This Is Me document. I think the challenge is the busyness and the pressures and having the time to look at that, and I think it really reinforces that it has to be a priority to understand the needs of our patients on the wards when those documents are made available and they are filled in. I think on a more system level, the carer talks about the challenges of being treated between different hospitals for the patient and how the travels and how uncoordinated the care can feel for the receiver and the family member when you're being treated across two different organisations. And also they give an example of having to take equipment to another hospital to be repaired to then bring it back to our emergency care hospital, which again, they highlight, what if I wasn't there, what would happen? So I think in terms of giving the board some assurance, because it doesn't make easy reading, there is work happening at the moment, so we are currently developing a strategy for the Trust for unpaid carers, both for our patients, but also to underpin the support that we give to our staff as carers in the organisation. We're going through a process of co-production at the moment, so we've identified some draft priorities. You would have been aware last week that it was National Carers' Rights Day. We used that as a really great opportunity. So Paula Chandran and her team, Julie Matheson and her team, the Admiral nurses and my team, were outside staff restaurants talking to patients and staff about how can we support you, what matters to you as carers. And there was some really good discussions with staff who really feel passionately about supporting carers and would really welcome a development and some extra support in terms of signposting, etc. So early in the new year, we hope to have a draft strategy that's been co-produced both by staff, patients, and we're going out into the community in the new year to work with both of our carers centres, hopefully, in terms of engaging with carers living and working and supporting in the community. There's also a pilot on our palliative care unit at the moment around open visiting, and part of that is to recognising carers and people who have a caring role as being care partners and how we work better with those care partners as part of this pilot. So, you know, I will say again, difficult reading, but just to give assurance that there's some real work happening at the moment. So we will have an action plan that we will bring to SQ&I as part of this work as well. Thank you.
Joe, thank you. There's a lot of issues in there. Thank you for that report, in particular indicating how we're looking to start to address it. But can we just dig a bit further? There's loads of issues. The first one I wanted to pick out was the response to carers. I remember at the very recent board, Jeremy, you were really passionate about the recognition that we need to be understanding the carers' perspective and that they tend to know best, and that was a lot of why we established the Call for Concern programme. But it kind of sounds like we've still got some work to do, and I guess my first question, that I know you're ready to respond, Jeremy, is this work that you're doing, is it engaging the medics? Because that perhaps is going to be where the greatest behaviour changes might be needed.
Jeremy's kindly given me a slot on CPG in January the 12th to come and talk to the members of CPG about the work that we've done to date and to get their feedback and their input into the strategy development.
Okay. Jeremy?
So, I mean, just to say I'm sorry to hear this story. You know, these aren't the experiences that I think myself or all the team that would have been on the ward at that time. I think there are understandable pressures that make these things hard, but we are absolutely committed to try and deliver an area where this increased personalisation around healthcare, whereby all of the information, and I think we have very good systems for passing on what you might call traditional clinical information, although diabetes is very important, and that I think should have been addressed, and there would have been, I'm pretty sure, a nutrition assistant helping the meal selection, and they should know that that patient has diabetes. But it's having all of a broader set of clinical information, including this ISME documentation. We've discussed that as part of our strategy. But it is going to be, you know, a long journey. These are busy hospitals, and patients see a lot of people all of the time. So to smoothly change all of that is something that's going to involve some cultural change. But we are absolutely committed on that journey, and to create an environment where we support the staff and the patients to achieve what they need to do together, and that's all going to be driven by, I hope, some new experience measures that we co-design with our patient experience partners.
Thank you. Any more comments on the development of carers issue? Sorry.
I was just going to bring up the mental health training issue, because I think that's another area that...
Can we just settle the carers bit, and we'll come back to mental health? Are there any other comments or questions on that? Then the action on that, we're recognising it's an issue, we're recognising that it's not that people are opposed to it, it's that it's been hard to do. There's some work that's been commissioned, which is coming into SQ&I in the spring. Have I got that right?
Yeah, because it's one of our priorities, so we've updated recently on our progress, but we will, at the end of the financial year, we will be coming with what we've achieved to date and the action plan.
Okay, so as a board, we can revisit in the hope that it can be more optimistic on the care and engagement than this individual snapshot shows. Yeah. Good. Then the other big issue that I spotted that you're about to respond to is mental health training. Willow says haven't had enough training on it, don't really know how to cope with that. That was the biggest kind of gap in what we can be doing to support it that jumped out to me.
So there are mental health training offers, but I don't think they're sufficiently coordinated or targeted. I do know the matrons on the medical side are particularly focused in and around skilling up people who work on Ward 3. I think, as you're aware, we've been talking to CNTW, who run our liaison team. Part of their role is to support training. So we're in the middle of those conversations, and we would expect one of the outcomes of the work that we're doing together will be to develop our training offer, particularly on the NSEG side.
We know from other discussions that mental health, the presentation of patients with mental health concerns has been causing real challenges in a number of settings. This is part of a wider story, isn't it? The training is important, but actually getting on top of where we are on mental health is a
I think it's really one of increasing complexity of the needs of our patients, and it isn't just mental health needs. It's there are patients with more physical, with more a larger disease burden, and it's addressing in a bespoke way the needs of that group of patients. But whilst the numbers are relatively small individually, there are many more presenting now in hospitals, and they do provide challenges because of the complexity of the needs that they have, and that's something we just must address.
Jim, will you sit on?
No.
Oh, sorry. Good. I was hearing that there's work going on developing a wider mental health strategy, or reviewing our existing mental health strategy, which will be coming along in the spring at some point.
Correct.
Just a sentence on that?
So it's coming to CPG next week, and we've now met with, we've had our first wider meeting with the CNTW team. We've agreed a number of shared streams of work, and we'll be working on improvements on those issues together.
Good. I'm conscious that the wider issues of mental health were escalated to board through discussions in more than one subcommittee, so I think we will have an interest in seeing that strategy through the appropriate mechanism in due course. Any more on the patient stories?
Can I bring up the ambulance? Oh, sorry.
Let's take Alan first, please.
Those of you who remember the last 5 years will know that I've been binding on about hearing some bad news stories instead of good news stories. I just want to say thank you very much that we've actually got there, and let's hear more and learn from them. Thank you.
That's great. Let's keep this as a pattern. It's almost a preference. I don't want us to end up feeling bad about what we're doing, because we know that we're doing a lot of really positive stuff, but we do learn more from this kind of thing. So well done, Joe, and keep that going. What's the next?
So I wanted to pick up the issue of right care, right place. The ambulance service do transport patients in using geography, but I think it would be true to say that we have had conversations with our nearest neighbours, particularly Newcastle, and there is an openness to trying to get patients to the right location where it really meets their care needs, and I think that is an aspect of this case that I think we can also make progress on, so that people are treated by the clinicians that know them best.
Okay, to summarise, we're glad we've had bad news stories, although we're never glad that the bad news happens. We recognise that the issues of listening to carers and engaging them is complicated, it's cultural. We're reassured that there's some significant work taking place. We will hear more about it because we want to make sure that we're on top of that. We've recognised that mental health training and support is an ongoing issue for many of our staff, and we will be hearing more also about that in due course. And CPG is having a first look at this emerging strategy very soon. Thank you. Then Joe, still with you, the patient and staff experience report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our patient experience report with some staff experience as well. So if we look at our external provider, which we call our right time measurement, so that is an independent measurement of patient experience 2 weeks post-discharge. So I think overall, if we look at the inpatient, outpatient and ED, we continue to have strong performance when we compare ourselves nationally. So we benchmark ourselves against the national surveys because overall we're predominantly our surveys compare with the majority of the questions within those surveys. So we do continue to have strong performance. However, when we measure against ourselves for Q2, we see a decline for inpatients. We also see for our ED a decline for the 10th data point running. So the only, but I would add to that everybody stays within the top 20%. Areas of focus again for ED is around pain management and waiting. And Q2 for all sites, when we look at site level for ED, with the exception of North Tyneside, are all below the mean now. So I think it's something that we're aware of, and we'll continue to measure and bring that to the board. If we look at our real-time inpatient measurement programme, so this is when our staff go in to talk to patients and provide that feedback to staff in real time, and we continue to see strong results, and we're talking to around 500 patients a month with that programme. With the community patient experience measurements, the overall satisfaction score for community services from patients is just under 94%. If we look at the negative aspects of what patients report, for this quarter it relates particularly to access and waiting for patients. And then, as you'll all be aware, the National Staff Survey closed this Friday. We're just waiting for the final figures, so there's some adjustments to be made with respect of leavers to the organisation. But we were sitting just under our target of last year, so we would hope to hit that or more once our leavers. MPC were at 76%, NHFM at 61.5%, and bank staff just over 46%, which were all better than last year. So with fingers crossed, we should beat all of our totals for next year with the adjustments.
Very good, Jo. Who wants to comment or raise questions, Nisha?
Jo hasn't mentioned it in her report, but they have started some real-time patient experience feedback for ED. We've done the first one of those already, and that's a rolling programme, I think, every couple of weeks. So whilst I suspect it will show very similar things, there's something about how we can provide immediate feedback to the team that are working there, both in terms of the positives, because I think particularly at times of pressure, when staff feel like they want to be able to do a good job and don't always feel like they're able to do that, I think that patient engagement feedback in real time gives them that. I think similarly though, it's also pulling out things that are in the moment around pain control and waiting time, so that they can then look and try and feedback and do something about and see an immediate impact, which I think will help to embed that improvement. So something that we said we would do from winter last year to provide that real-time feedback, the team asked that they saw that would be a positive step, and I think thanks to Jo and the team for putting that in place.
Good. Jo?
And just to highlight the board in addition, which I will bring at a later stage, I'm planning to bring it to EMT in the next few weeks, is we're working with a company that's using public domain feedback, so all of the information that patients will feedback about places such as ED, maternity, anywhere in the trust on NHS Choices Facebook, they're using AI technology to analyse that data, and it gives us in real time where we are score-wise. We can benchmark against other organisations and nationally, the star raters. And Paul and I had a look at it yesterday, and it looks really exciting. So at the moment we're just still in the checking phase, but as soon as that's ready we'll bring that to board, and there will be some comms for staff, because every member of staff in the organisation can access it to look at their own data.
Sounds terrifying to me.
There's 40,000 comments from our internal sources and external, which is amazing. It's all been analysed with AI. It's unbelievable.
Okay. We'll see how that goes. Yes, please.
I just wanted to pick up that we are kind of triangulating this elsewhere. Because one of the issues that that always concerns me is when you've got the same thing happening like food, where it's the same everywhere, but we get really different scores. So we raised this in the NHFM meeting, and they have picked up where there is a very low score, they're particularly targeting ward now to see if they are being given the right options. Because it always frightens me that you can get a ward where they're measuring it as 6 point something and everyone else is giving it a 10. So we have picked that up with NHFM and they are looking at ensuring that patients are being given the same access to the full menu so that we're not giving ourselves a problem here.
Very good. Ben?
Thank you, Chair. Great report as always, Joe. John, on the staff experience work you do for the People and Culture Committee, you give us a great breakdown in terms of a quality, diversity, inclusion type analysis. And I just wonder if at some point in time in the future it might be useful to have some similar analysis from a patient's perspective in terms of any particular outliers or disproportionate impact in terms of patient experience.
Yeah, absolutely, Bernie. We can look at that, and part of the Fresh Eye that we're underway at the moment with the Patient Experience Measurement Programme is talking to people like Chris Wilcoxon from the Public Health team around what are the possibilities within, say, our real-time programme for stratifying the data so we can understand from an inequalities perspective and an EDI perspective. And obviously we've got Jimmy and Post now who will get involved in the community to understand experience from that perspective as well. So I think that will be a growing area within our Fresh Eye because I think it's an extremely important area. Thank you.
Alistair, would the Health Inequalities Board have an interest in that work?
It would absolutely, but once it's ready, but yeah, I think that would be a good place to pull it together.
Good. Okay. Terrific report, as usual. Some clear learnings, some clear evidence of actions being taken. Always the worry, seeing Q2 not so good at MSEC, but plenty of evidence of quality work. Thank you very much indeed, Joe, and do pass on our thanks to your team. Let's move on, shall we, to the walkabouts. And in the same spirit, it's great, all the positivity, and there's a lot of positivity in there, but let's particularly, we can, focus on the learning. Steve, you were running.
Yes, Chair. I visited Annick over a couple of different visits, and so I think this particular walkabout report actually straddles two public boards. So at the risk of repeating myself slightly, I'll go through the report in its totality. So just to reiterate that the first time I went, the minor injuries unit was not open and hadn't been open the day previous. So that was a poor start, I guess, which thankfully everything went better from that point forward. But I did note that I felt the signage for people coming to the minor injuries unit wasn't as good as it could have been. It felt like it was hastily written, a bit ad hoc, and I would suggest that we have some regular sort of notices up to help people who are approaching the minors injury unit on the occasions when it might be closed. Given Annick's rural nature and the kind of lots of visitors who maybe don't know the area as well as they might, I think that would just really help people be signposted to the most appropriate venture. That said, the receptionist was there and was really friendly and would welcome anybody that came in and give them the right advice, but just some better signage. The second visit, the minors injury unit was open, and then I got to see it in its full strength and capability. It was great to see. It was an early start, but already there had been two completely different but very similar cases. They were both falls. One was an older lady who the team were working out about what would be the best outcome for her, the best venue for her, and were doing some really detailed conversations with colleagues in other parts of the trust to decide on that. And then at the other end of the spectrum there was a young schoolgirl unaccompanied who had been skipping away to school and also fallen over and bumped her head, and she was being looked after by the same team. And I just thought, that's a really good indication of the breadth that those units get. It did flag up, I think, to me, the reliance on things like video conferencing and good connectivity to allow those more community-based settings to tap into the specialist advice and support that are on other sites. They really valued that, and it was really useful to them. They talked about it at length, but they also said that sometimes when the connectivity isn't good, it really does affect their ability to deliver a great service. Other things just to, I guess, raise. Marion met me at at reception, and it was great to be introduced to such a wide variety of people. It was almost like a microcosm of the entire trust just on the one visit. I spoke to NHFM colleagues, people in the catering department, as well as day surgery and the like. For assurance, there was a safeguarding alert raised, and it was about the way the site is organised, and some stairs that weren't kind of closed off to the public, and a safeguarding alert had been raised by somebody about a missing child. It was really reassuring to know that the next time I went back, that had been dealt with, and the mitigations had been put in place to stop that happening again. I experienced some great refurbishments. Anyone who's been to Alnwick will know it's a really quite old building, 19th century, I think. But you wouldn't know it when you walked around the refurbished Ward 1 and the outpatients area. They just looked really, really good quality, and you wouldn't know that you were in a very old building. So credit to NHFM and the contractors who carried that out. And then finally, I went across to meet the community nursing team. They were based in an adjoining medical practice upstairs, and it was really interesting to see how they made the most of that co-location, so to speak, and that was clearly a help to their work. And I had a good chat with the team there, because I often wonder about our community staff and how they can assure their own safeguarding and the safeguarding of others when they're all out and about in the community, in people's homes. I think it's a different ballgame to some of our stuff on hospital sites, so it's really reassuring to be able to ask questions and get really clear answers from the staff there. And then finally, I think I might have said it last time, but it was really most assuring to be handheld by Marion on a visit around that site, where clearly she takes a lot of time, there's a lot of attention to how everybody in that site is feeling, how they're doing, and there's a real great culture and rapport there. And I think for our community-based services, it's a real bonus to have visibility of senior management on those sites to maintain the sort of culture that we want to encourage. Thank you.
Great report. Thank you for that, Steve, and thanks to all colleagues for doing the visits. Any points arising out of that? Yes, Greg.
Yes, Chair, I'll just have a look at the connectivity problems that were discussed in that report, because all of us should be listening.
Thank you. Yes, Phil.
Just briefly, it was good to see that Steve incorporated the community part of that. We've talked before about on some of the walkabouts, we do tend to be more acute focused on those, which is fine, but I think we should try and incorporate a few more around the community. Might not be a walkabout, might be a drive about, but I think we should look to do more of that over the course of the next year.
Melissa, can you build that into the forward plan, please? That's good. Anything more arising out of the Alnwick visit? Then, Richard, where have you been? On this occasion, you've been to North Tyneside.
North Tyneside, yeah. So, I guess my two usual generic comments about North Tyneside. One is the volunteers are brilliant there, and they make you so welcome and help. Second is it's impossible to find your way around the place. And somebody who doesn't live in there should take a fresh pair of eyes and look at the signage in that hospital, because it is really, really difficult. In terms of the visit itself, I went to the urgent treatment centre, which was the first to have moved to an appointment-only system, which sort of at first glance you feel is a bit odd, but it seems to have worked really well, both with the staff, but more importantly with the patients. And perhaps picking up on the governance yesterday, it seems to have generated its own publicity because of the numbers that's piling into North Tyneside at the moment. And certainly it was busy, but it was very well managed and it worked well. Radiology, I always love visiting radiology departments. The staff there are always enthusiastic. As a former university guy, I love seeing the toys, and it was good to go around. I've got to say the staff side of that department was disappointing. Chip Formica, a staff room which looked really depressing, and it felt that a bit of investment on sprucing up the staff side would be money very well spent. Some of it looked to me to be opportune for bright funding, particularly for the staff room, and it just made the place pleasant to work in, as it is obviously to be on the patient side. The contrast with Wandsbek was interesting. Wandsbek, you go in and you think the urgent treatment centre needs something doing to it, but the radiology department's really nice, and it's the opposite way around at North Tyneside. So I guess it's getting a list of these things and getting them fixed.
Okay. Both of the first two walkabouts have referenced signage. I was asking about that at NHFN last week at the board, and they are, I know, doing a fairly fundamental review of that. Partly in the hope that we might see some improvement across the piece even before we have the warm welcome to CPC in the spring. Whether that timing quite works, I don't know, but that is a common theme, and I don't think we should ignore it. It's an important part of patient experience. Jim?
So I was just going to pick up on the staff area. You're absolutely right. It's quite a long time since there was any money spent in there. And on the, specifically with a charity, we tend to have a system where we require people to give us bids on the shop floor effectively to the charity. We need to find a mechanism out of this where we'll find something, it's amenable to charitable funds, we actually shortcut the process and mobilise something. So we'll carry that out as an option.
Should we do that? We'll agree that as an action. We're going to find a way of expediting improvements in the staffing sector, staffing facilities in North Tyneside. Good. Next up, Ruth and Phil. How are you dividing it up between them?
I was going to let Ruth do it.
Ready for a change, okay, right.
Cheers, Phil.
I'll chip in.
Ruth.
Guess what? Signage is very key.
Yeah, so
And we have raised it before when we talked about NBC, and I know we talked about FM. The only thing I will say is, while the signage is confusing, I've not been to a place yet where if you see anybody and you look vaguely lost, they will point you, take you somewhere. So I do also think that as a good sign. We went all over the place. We went to orthopaedics, went to endoscopy, and we went to surgical day unit. Orthopaedics was just interesting to see how much things are moving forward in terms of speed and time, and the fact that they were saying you don't even get a full day anymore for a hip replacement. Unbelievable. The trial on the physio's point was interesting, and I've been on another walkabout since where this is really relevant about the way we get people out is by having the right staff in to discharge them, and they were talking about that being on a trial basis, but obviously it was working very well for them, so we really need to pay attention to what that does to our kind of length of stay. Endoscopy were great, they'd just been through their JAG accreditation, so they were very pleased. The biggest issue that came out of endoscopy for us was the fact that they were all walking miles to get things decontaminated, and it is a long way in one spec to walk to decontamination. So again, it's just life, it's about the buildings that we inherit, and we understand that, but it's kind of one of those where if there was any opportunity, you would question whether or not we could move things differently. And then on surgical day unit, it was good because I'd been to North Tyneside, and then I went to Wandsbek not long afterwards, and they were different but similar, and that was a really reassuring thing. You wouldn't get a different experience, didn't feel like you were treated any differently, and they were very efficient. We did raise the fact that we found lots of things in said surgical day unit, like the very expensive dental equipment that we don't use, that's sitting in the room. And it does make me question about, well, obviously in amnesty, it's like cleaning out your spare room, isn't it? We do have these spaces with quite expensive kit, kind of just sitting in a cupboard or sitting in a room, which is a space issue and a value issue, I assume, about whether there's something we can do with it. So I'd say that was our. Anything else, Phil?
There was the IT issue, which I think we have raised, in that they spend a lot of time on paper getting prepped for the following day, because you can't actually do anything in nerve centre until you've admitted patients, and if they waited for the admittance, it would then be chaotic around trying to organise the list and everything. So I think we're looking at, I mean, they do it really, really well. It's just a shame that they're having to do it all on paper, so potentially there might be another solution to look at that. But the signage thing, it really just needs to be, it won't be difficult. I think we've allocated a volunteer to OneSpec now as well, so that will help with matters. But people do get irritated about the urgent care centre location and that kind of stuff.
Dave, sorry to bounce you once again, it's another IT issue.
Yeah, this one's really complicated. So the way our systems work is you have to admit a patient before you can deal with anything, partly for safety, but also just for location in the hospital. So there's a few ways we're trying to get around that. So our current systems aren't working to that same methodology, but unwinding all of that is really difficult and time consuming. So we either have to look at creating a different system for this all to work on, or backing out of our current method of that admit thing. So it's a big job, but
Okay, well, let's not try and solve it now, but it feels like just something someone at some point on the IMT should at least scratch their head around, even if it's not going to be an easy solution.
there's a roadmap for it as well.
There's a roadmap, okay.
I was just going to pick up on the consistency point there, Ruth, and you're absolutely right. I've been an inpatient in North Tyneside, sorry, a day case, North Tyneside, OneSpec and Hexham, and they do all have their own sort of little subtleties. Generally, the experience is brilliant every time, but there is something about when we're doing refurbs and rebuilds, just learning from some of the things that do make it better, like proximity to theatre and things better. It's really incredibly helpful. Slightly more single rooms in other places as well, kind of thing. So just to carry that forward in planning for future estates, where the systems do now feel very similar, but they didn't always. But just those little things that make a difference about how far you go and stuff like that.
Good. Okay, so there's a couple of actions from that. There was once again the IT one. I'm not sure if there's an action around the decontamination unit distance. But,
we are looking into that now. Be completely with Jim. It's all about adjacencies and not having patients or staff to be working any more distance than they need to. So unfortunately, as you said at the time, that was all we could do to really get through the system. But we will look at it. And just one final thing, if I may, just to say that the dental room is almost cleared. And we've got housekeeping in there, but we're also looking at a different space for that room.
You'll see if you find it on your next walkabout.
That's basically that's what we want to know. Okay, then the final walkabout is from Katie. The agenda entitles it as the Northumbria. I have to say, I still have no idea what I should be calling NSEC, the Northumbria. But for now, on the agenda, it's the Northumbria, and Katie, you were there.
Thank you, and sorry I can't be there in person today. Just want to thank Bijou, first of all, for again another really detailed and insightful walkabout, so thank you for your time. We visited critical care unit, cardiology and the respiratory ward. I know we're supposed to be focusing on learnings today, but Bijou and I were very fortunate to see how one patient was being treated, and it was just a really inspiring few minutes. So there was an intensive care patient who'd been relocated from the ward to sit outside in what was a lovely day with family and 3 consultants. And it was just, very inspiring just to see how they'd set it up so that he could have time with his family whilst having that support there, and the dignity and respect that he was able to share with his family was wonderful. And Bijou and I struggled to fight back tears watching it. It was lovely to see, and to see that privacy the patient had. So that was fantastic. In terms of lessons learned, there was one patient who'd waited 3 to 4 hours in the waiting room in the reception and was called to a treatment room. Seconds after the patient had actually got into the treating room, another nurse came out and called the same patient to a different treatment room. And obviously that caused a number in the waiting room to giggle, and it was difficult to see. So I think it would be just good to ensure that the reception process is as efficient as it could be, and obviously patients aren't duplicated and called to two places. Had great discussions with a lot of staff, and it's the same lovely things coming through about the family culture, their commitment, morale, how they enjoy working with the trust. What also came through was time and the negative impact of strikes, and how they're finding it difficult just to sit back, think through change, think through innovations, think through the strategy, what they want to achieve. It's just getting through the day. So it was, again, another common theme coming through. And the only other learning was about wheelchairs. I believe that there are sufficient wheelchairs there, but it was just volunteers were struggling to locate those wheelchairs for patients that were needing support straight away. So again, it's just maybe lessons for volunteers where they're located or ease of access.
Good, thank you very much indeed. Any comments, responses? I don't think we need to respond to every detail in Katie's really helpful report. Yes, Russ.
Just a really brief one on the wheelchairs. It is a bit of an issue for volunteers, and I think they do frequently go missing somewhere else if they go on ambulances and things. So the charity has got a process at the minute to buy a few more, and the volunteers are just trying to keep those in the right areas and the portals as well, so we know where they all are. But there's a lot of work going on around that.
Okay, let's note that the work is going on. That's good. Excellent. Then, Dave.
No, sorry.
Oh, sorry, you're sitting in something else. Good, in which case let's move on. Item 2.4, Guardian of the Safe Working Report. The biggest issue seems to be how difficult it is to recognise that the clocks change. That seems to be the biggest problem we face. Who would ever have known that the clocks change in October?
Yeah. Well, I think we've always known that the clocks change. It's about getting us to record those clock changes appropriately. Okay. So I'm talking for Mike. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that he's actually seeing Madonna in new trains. He says it's because his wife wants to. He's a big fan, but there you go. So in terms of exception reports, we look to be approximately this year on target to have a similar number to last year, which is no bad thing. We don't want to have none. It is important that we use them as a tool for improvement. The majority are still in medicine, but I'd just like to point out that's because most of our trainee doctors are within medicine, and as are a lot of our beds. And there's no really current hotspots, and toil is time off in the Moo. I think we now have 3 fines. It's the lowest number in the region. I'd just like to flag up the work Mike's doing with the postgraduate forum, because I think engaging our training medical workforce is really important. They're a really core and key staff group for a number of the safety measures and for the whole of patient experience. So we've, after COVID, we've managed to increase the attendance, and with regular drop-ins. We now have a new leadership fellow called Breon Samuels, who is very enthusiastic, is a GP trainee, and is going to be doing some specific work on how we improve engagement in junior doctors. Mike keeps a very, very close eye on rotas, which are highly complicated, very difficult to achieve compliance, but we are on track, and with only a small hiccup that we had in and around the August period this year, it is difficult for us to get rota information from the training from the LET in time to fully announce everything for our junior doctors, which makes it harder to set up our complicated rotas, and there were some issues with surgery which we very, very quickly aligned out. And there continue to be some rota gaps, despite the fact that Australia and New Zealand opened their doors this year. Actually, we haven't got an increased number of gaps. That's remaining well managed. Very happy to ask any questions.
Thank you for that. Fairly reassuring report out of that. Any questions, comments, challenges? Yes, Kate.
I think we've done a bit of work about the engagement on the post-grad forum. As you can see, we've said it's better because there's 15 people that attend and we do have hundreds of junior doctors. So we are doing some work, and I'm discussing with Mike, and Breon's been fantastic in getting that engagement, but it's still an issue. And it was evident through the strikes as well, and if we can have more attendance at those forums, we'll be able to have those better discussions. So that is on the radar. Still needs to improve.
Happy to receive that report. Very good. Staff flu. It doesn't seem to be very high rates at the moment, Jeremy.
Well, okay. So I think we've entered back into our pre-COVID pattern, which is to say that the uptake is very, very good at the start. Then there's the hard yards all the way through to Christmas, and we get not quite to the line that we want to through. I don't think that there are any particular reasons for it other than we need to engage staff in that. We don't make either flu or COVID compulsory. Different staff groups do tend to approach it slightly differently. The team are working very, very well with the staff, and the way that we find the best way of working through this particular phase is to work with the business unit, identify staffing areas where vaccination is not up to scratch. But you can see the pattern from last year where flu was more popular than COVID has stretched out a little bit. And I think that just is the place where, on a voluntary basis, staff see the importance, and we're undertaking a number of campaigns because it is important to get our frontline staff fully vaccinated. We sit at usually about 3 or 2 or 3 within the region, depending on which staff group you look at. It's a problem.
Okay. Any comments beyond? It just feels a bit disappointing that the vaccination rates are lower than last year. And okay.
Yeah, so I've got a more up-to-date figure. So the paper says 42%, we're at 48% now,
That's better.
which is only 2% below this time last year. And given all the factors Jeremy's just mentioned, we are getting there and continuing pushing. And I think the key that we're focusing on is the high-risk areas. And the roving team they'll go anywhere. So I keep saying to the team, just ask and we'll come and we'll vaccinate. So we're doing everything we need to do.
Well, it won't make much odds, but just I suspect we, as a board, we want to underline the commitment we have to it. Richard.
So I guess, and I've seen a few of the stats coming through the last few weeks on this, I find it very disappointing. The obvious risk to patients from staff not being vaccinated is huge, and so anything we can do to energise that campaign and get more and more people through, the better.
Okay. Kate, I'm sure you'll reflect on that. But yeah. Okay. Thank you. Then let's move on to the performance section, and we've got a winter update from Simon.
Hello everybody, so my name is Simon Eaton, I'm the Business Unit Director of Medicine Emergency Care. I'm here with Paul.
I'm Paul Matley, one of the Deputy Directors of Medicine.
So we've got 2 updates, one on winter, which is trust-wide, not just medicine, and then the medicine update, although they obviously overlap quite substantially. In the interest of time, I'm going to run through the slides and then give all the difficult questions to Paul. So it's just an opportunity to look back to last winter, essentially, and to remind us that we had what we thought at that stage was a pretty unprecedented winter scenario, and there's some statistics on there where we had some really very difficult times between mid-December and mid-January. You can see the tentativeness in what I said, because actually we've rivaled that 48 people waiting for beds in ED a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. We've recovered quicker than we were able to over the Christmas of last year, but I think we're in for an equally difficult winter. Actually, it wasn't just a bit of a one-off. But we also got some assurance that Jeremy led a review of care over that time. We did mortality reviews. Every case was reviewed by us and all the medical examiners, and then specific cases looked into. We looked at dataxes and experience, etc. And whilst we're very clear that experience was not what we would want it to have been last winter, with people waiting for beds and waiting for care and corridor care and that kind of stuff, we didn't see any impact on outcomes, we feel. So there's some assurance in there that our teams managed the care really well despite all the pressures that they were facing. And so that's very relevant to our key aims for this coming winter. But number one being that we need to look after our teams. They're the people that are going to get us through this. When the going gets tough, they pull all the stops out and manage as best they can. But we need to look after them. We've been trying to do that as best we can over the last 12 months with strikes and all the other things that have been happening which have had an impact upon that. We're having whole system conversations about safety and risk management, as we always do, but knowing that whilst the risk is at the front door and in those people who aren't getting the ambulance if things are being held up, we need to manage that risk right across the system and make sure that everyone sees their part in helping offset that. That this year we are aiming to maintain both elective and non-elective streams throughout. So previous years when we've needed extra beds, we've taken over, if you like, an elective ward, often Hexham, so not huge throughputs in it, but this year we're intending to, if we need that, we already have needed that, to put up a ward so it doesn't have an impact on elective care. And then obviously make best use of all the beds availability we have, working very closely with our partners. And I'm not going to go through all of these things, you'll be pleased to hear, but it's really to emphasise that there's a lot of things going on. This is not a, well, we did that last year, let's just try and do the same sort of thing again. Particular highlights are the front door streaming, so we have some very senior people at the front door, and a couple of days ago, 20 patients, I think it was 21, got streamed to urgent treatment centres out of NSEC. And that was very helpful in terms of the numbers. And they weren't high acuity by the nature of being able to go to an urgent treatment centre, but they would have been numbers that would have got in the way, if you like, of people that were needing the services of NSEC. Obviously, virtual wards is a growing phenomena, and we see a lot of value in that. We're trying to work very hard on what's happening in ED, what's happening with the patients who are lodged waiting for a bed, making sure we've got escalation areas all the time. So the discharge lounge on the top floor, last winter was something we're going to need to open this again tonight, but now we're just saying this is something we need all the time. And there's only small numbers of patients in it who are going home tomorrow or going to a base site tomorrow, then that's grand, but we're intending to keep it open all the time. And then we've got this plan for a pop-up ward in North Tyneside in January that we've already needed to utilise for 2 weeks this month. It's now closed again. But we aim to kind of open those when we need to, then close them down as quickly as possible to try and recover and restore. And that was incredibly helpful a couple of weeks ago. We just almost wish we had it again at the moment. And that's part of the reality that we live. In our overflow of merging of these presentations in the medicine bit, I raised a question about whether we have got enough beds. And so we're working very close with all our partners, and we are also making plans for Plan B and Plan C, etc., whatever we need to deliver to make people stay safe during the winter period and keeping the elective going. And just, we're measuring everything we need to measure. We know we've got this persistent issue that we are still the best performance in the country, but we're still nowhere near as good as we want to be. And that's this eternal issue. And in the medicine slides, we'll show you some data on ambulance handover and things to show you that we have actually made a lot of movement on that in the last 12 months or so. So that's the winter part, just for any questions.
Yeah, let's pause on that first of all. Any questions? Yes, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, last year with the winter pressures, we were all obviously very concerned that anybody was coming to any harm. And you put a huge amount of effort in, a lot of people are doing different things, death reviews and all sorts of things. And you certainly S&Q was reassured that nobody had come to any serious harm. is that now embedded as part of the thing, or is it that just an episodic thing?
I would say both. So a lot of things we relied on the medical examiner review. So every patient who dies gets a medical examiner review. We relied on, all those sort of things are ongoing all the time, and we will step up whatever's needed. So if we go through a period of pressure, we can repeat what we did last year to give us an extra assurance and go in that bit extra depth. But all of those systems, we essentially magnified what we were doing already rather than do anything new.
Just to add as well, to give a live example, we have changed how we manage.
A bit closer to the mic, please, Paul.
We've changed how we manage our lodged patients as well in ED. So in terms of looking at harm and risk, they're now managed by people coming forward. The med-reg comes in and reviews all those patients overnight. So they have that ongoing medical review constantly to make sure that the patients are in the right place and receiving the right care.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're hearing that there haven't been, that there weren't adverse medical outcomes. I think in terms of experience, we cannot doubt that there was a lot of experience, and presumably in a similar vein in response to Alan, it's one thing to be monitoring afterwards the deaths, but I think you've been improving the ability to check that people aren't deteriorating while waiting. Is there anything you can say on that?
So certainly we were always mindful of making sure people aren't deteriorating while waiting, and any examples of those sorts of things we would investigate fully. We're now in a different world in terms of the old SI framework into PISA, but it's absolutely still will be reviewing and managing all of those things, see what we learn from it. We have now also got real-time patient experience at ED. So all of our wards with that for a few years. We haven't had that in the emergency department. We are now getting some information about that, which is reassuringly positive. It does, there are a couple of issues, particularly on wait times, although most people are almost alarmingly understanding of needing to wait in ED, which is just horrible, isn't it? And a specific issue of, yes, I was asked if I was in pain, I said I was in pain, and they took ages to give me some painkillers. So we are working on that thing. We've now got that data, which on the whole is reassuring the ED team that they're doing a good job, which I think is going to help promote, because we get this perception of we must be rubbish if all these people, and actually they are doing a good job for most of our patients. Thanks, Joe, again for
Sorry,
supporting that.
just on Joe, we're busy doing a bit of a live checking with all the ED staff as well throughout this period, so from a staff point of view as well, we can monitor that side of it.
Very good. Jim?
So I think there's a lot of effort goes into winter planning, and boards should be assured that it's a really thorough process every year, especially this year. A lot of learning from last year. We all know the plan usually lasts about half an hour once you've got into it. So it's really about the agility and the response, and it has been, as I mentioned earlier on, and Sam just reinforced, it's been quite tough the last few weeks. So we've had a bit of a warm up with all of that. We should expect it to be very, very tough for that peak winter period between Christmas and New Year, especially in early in the New Year. But I think in spite of my grumpiness about performance and stuff at times on all this, the team is incredibly agile, responsive, all over the detail, knowing individual patients at every time. So again, in terms of understanding risk, responding to risk, making decisions appropriately, it is a fantastic team and a fantastic setup. So we can all take a bit more comfort in that as well.
That's great, and that was a first-class report also from Simon and Paul, so thank you. And as board, we've been receiving very regular reports in the last few weeks as the planning for winter emerges, and that can all give us a fair degree of assurance. My one other question I will hold over to the next section, because you flagged up, have we got enough beds? And I kind of quite want to ask that question explicitly and start finding out any answers. But thank you very much for that. Let's move straight on into the business unit update from Medicine and Emergency Care.
So in terms of the business unit update, just to remind people, this is the same slide as last year, but it's just to remind people, we're a big business unit and we do more than emergency care. There's obviously a lot of ologies that people think about, but again, the long-term condition specialties, mental health services for older people, dietetics, physiotherapy, health psychology, all these kind of guys can get forgotten about a little bit in our ongoing predominance around the 4-hour weight, etc. And we see an awful lot of patients and provide an awful lot of patient care every week. So I'm going to start off with elective because I think there's a very positive picture there. And Barbara Scott in particular and the teams, Matt Warren, are doing a lot of work to address our appointment slot issues, and they're very positive about a trajectory towards getting that right down by the end of the year. This is in the context of consultant strikes and the impact of all those sorts of things, and they're confident if they can get that number of issues down, it also will come out to reduce the examples of wait time, and that's definitely been seen in gastroenterology, which is one of the real high flyers both for us but also recognised nationally around trying to manage the referrals coming in to make sure they're seeing the most appropriate people and therefore be able to see them very quickly. So the frustration of GPs are refer somebody in, they wait 6 or 8 weeks to be seen, by that time they've already come into the practice 2 or 3 times, again and again with the same people because you've not sorted it out yet. So we're very positive about that. And this is about clinic templates, it's about making sure we're using issues well, it's a little bit about recruitment and using slots well, and they're not going void, and it's a little bit about recruitment, but mainly this is about the teams just getting right on top of things. And that's been reflected on the whole in our referral to treatment time. There's still a couple of areas, notably rheumatology, which has always struggled. It's a small team with complex patients who require long-term care because of some of their biological agents and other sorts of things. So again, we're working on that. We've recruited into the specialty and then people are retiring. But there is a plan to continue to work on that. And actually, elderly medicine's been flagged a little bit, haven't done previously. And I think that's primarily because they've been concentrated on their wards, and we've reminded them that they're an outpatient specialty and they've got some issues as well, but they're now very much focused on this. And getting to tiny figures, but just see all the green at the bottom there, our elective recovery is right on track at 19%, 117% this year, which is fabulous. In terms of kind of A&E, if you like, figures, we are seeing a trend towards increased attendances, not just inappropriate attendances that could go elsewhere, but actually genuine health service need. And our performance around the 4-hour wait remains, as I say before, the best in the country, but we're truly in the 90% rather than over 95%. Which is not where we want to be. There's a lot of work trying to address that. But you can see here, particularly in the bottom left-hand graph, ambulances waiting more than 60 minutes. Our objective for this is 0. Okay, so we're still not hitting that, but it's much better than it was this time last year. And that's really about a focus in the department of making sure that this is something that they're working on in real time. It's very important that ambulances can get away and get us when we have our road traffic accident or a heart attack or whatever else. This is really, really key. Again, this is just, there's no detail in this you can see, but this is just showing all of the wards in the NSEC building, medical wards in the NSEC building, and their discharges each week. And it's something we've been using with the teams just to show how much variation exists. It's a huge amount of variation. There's no pattern to this. It's not seasonal specifically, and so what we're trying to do is have conversations about why that variation exists. Some of it will be acuity and patient mix, but much of it might well be clinician behaviours, and so we're really trying to work on addressing that, make the best possible use of the beds. So our challenges, we've mentioned some of this already, but we had a really difficult winter last year. I think we're in for another one. But we've provided the assurances we've already talked about around that. We've had specific issues this year on top of all of that, which about strikes, which have been mitigated throughout. So it's really had minimal overall impact either on non-elective or elective performance, but it has definitely had an impact on staff and teams asked to do extra shifts and all of the unease and unrest that was occurring at that point. There may be a outcome for consultants that might well inflame a lot of our other teams across the organisation, and we don't quite know what's happening with junior doctors, so we're not through that wood yet, sadly. And then we've got this issue about bed loss. So I'm completely supportive of the ward refurbishments that have taken place at the baseline. So essentially, on the whole, there's 6 beds in a bay become 5 beds and a toilet. So everyone's got easy access to a toilet. And the final ward, which sadly was my ward, will be complete in a couple of weeks' time. We'll finally will have the same standard of care. So that's great. That's improved dignity and patient experience. And in the latter refurbishments, we've also included more side rooms and bariatric rooms, which hopefully reduces the number of beds being closed and infection control issues. And obviously, anyway, we've got our constant focus on using the beds well, but we need to acknowledge we've lost 24 beds in the last couple of years because of this, these very needed improvements, and 24 is around about the number on average you'd say of people waiting beds in ED. So there is something in that, I think. So have we got enough beds? Is it a question we can't? That's not something we can address this winter. We're just going to have to do whatever we can. But I think it's we see where we are through this winter, whether it was last year just a one-off, or whether this is a recurrent pattern. And if so, we might have some difficult decisions to make in the springtime. Recreating wards and the staffing and the funding, these are not easy things to do. And then obviously another challenge which we're seeing more and more is increased mental health presentations, not just the prevalence in the community, which is definitely going up, but also the complexity of how people are being managed across the various work services. So Jeremy in particular and the teams are working very hard with CCW about talking about this, reviewing our strategy, our capacity to manage and the facilities, which are pretty rubbish actually. People in ED looking at what we call our kind of psychiatry rooms, they're just a chair in a room really. So a big long list here of things that we're extremely proud of. I'm not going to go through all of them, we'd be delighted to know. I'm going to pick out some things. So we've had a number of exemplar visits, people wanting to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and they've been really positive. Fortunately, they've gone away affirming that they came in for the good reason. But actually it's really good for our teams to hear that they're doing well. We did a peer review at James Cook around their emergency department as well, and one of the big positives about that was our team coming back from that peer review going, oh, we're better than we thought we were, thank goodness we've not got an ambulance corridor like that. I think what I would also pick out is that we've now got the real-time experience in ED we've talked about. Gastroenterology have been a real team, high flyer. They've won Team of the Year this year. Particularly, this is a group of people that 3 or 4 years ago had Bijou and I in a room, and we had the hairdryer treatment for an hour and a half about how difficult things were. And largely they have picked themselves up, dusted themselves down. They've got a bit of recruitment, that's been positive, but they've also just taken a whole new view of the world and what they're doing and become masters of their own domain and are really, really positive now. So I'm really proud of that. And justify my personal thing. I'm delighted that Jeremy and I and Alistair and others have signed a letter to the Royal College of Physicians in support of physician associates that we find incredibly valuable members of our team here, but through some of our exemplar organisations and certainly social media have taken a real kick in at the moment. And so we're aiming to try and make sure they feel the support that we definitely, and the value that we have of them in our organisation. So I won't go through this. You can imagine the mixture of difficult stuff, amazing teams, lots to be proud of. Electively, we're doing really well. Emergency, we're doing the best we possibly can, and we're constantly trying to evolve and move and address and improve things. Thank you.
Terrific report, really, really clear summary, and I think that's chiming with what we've been hearing across the piece. Questions, comments before we go into my question about beds? Billy?
Thank you, Simon and Paul. A great report. So, my kind of questions are just comments on in relation to the really some great stuff in there. But in terms of, and thank you for the Physician Associate, because we talk a lot about the alternative workforce at the People and Culture Committee, and I know Jeremy's brought this to committee previously, and there's all types of challenges and issues, and I've read a lot of that recent media coverage, and it's not particularly helpful at all, I didn't think, but so I think that's great to hear that you put that level of support in. But in terms of challenges, obviously it's a big business unit, 2,000 kind of ish staff, and sickness absence is clearly a challenge for the trust. It's kind of within the radar of people in culture currently, so we're giving it a lot of scrutiny currently in a support context. And I think your business unit's at about 5.75-ish %. Now that's better than it was last year, so well done on that, but it's still high. And clearly you use bank and all the other mechanisms to offset those shortages, but that puts a major burden, we know. So you're managing potentially 100 plus 200 people in some areas off work, and that's a huge challenge on you guys. So well done on managing that, but we're I'm just really making it as an observation that as a People and Culture Committee, we're bringing a bit of a sharper focus around absence levels across the trust, and it's clearly a challenge. That wasn't overtly on there, but I know you're acutely aware of it.
No, but yeah, it is a big challenge, and I think the numbers are higher in our business units and other business units, and there's a lot of work goes into managing those people. We know the detail behind it, we know the split of what people are off with and how we best help support that as well. But you're right, you then get that complexity of to cover that. You have banks, you have other people in the system, and a lot of the work we've done with Joe's team around the staff experience, we've gone into certain areas and actually understood areas a lot better as well to help us get that two-way feedback. Thanks, Paul. Well done.
Okay. Jim, how do we approach this issue of beds? I mean, on the face of it, a reduction of 24 beds in the last year feels like a kind of a retrograde move, and I don't know how to think about it.
Yeah, it's an absolute nightmare, to be fair. So some of the bed reductions have been related to refurbishments and other necessary things, and remove capacity around and restore it. There's a constant process of trying to recalibrate what we need, what kind of beds, whether it's a hospital bed, a community bed, which site, etc. And generally try not to expand the bed base because it's very problematic, and also if we opened 100 beds today, they'd be full tonight. So just trying to keep appropriate tension in the system. As Simon said, it is what it is now for the next few weeks. We'll probably need to initiate a bit more of a formal reset process in the planning round and just test again, do we have the right numbers, are the right kind, are they in the right place? When you look at the daily sit reps, this time last year, we'd probably be running routinely on about 100 empty beds. Every day now we're running on about 60 empty beds. So there is a change in our occupancy over the last year or so that is going to need to be addressed, and the rate limiting step is whether we can actually stuff it.
I think the other thing as well is that we probably have enough beds through the summer. There's a real summer-winter thing that goes on here, so through the summer we can squeeze and we can push and actually maintain most of the time within the footprint that we've got. It's just during winter, sometimes because of volume and sometimes because of acuity, that just means we get that little bit fuller. So in an ideal world, you'd want a bed that you can, a ward that you have on for 6 months, off for 6 months, but that just becomes really hard to manage from a staffing point of view.
Jeremy?
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into the debate about the physical beds, but I do think we really do need to make the virtual wards work. There is an increase in bed stock. This is the first year that we've had any. I think we're just getting used to the idea. So it isn't surprising that we haven't managed to make the most use, but I think that could be an incredibly valuable resource for both preventing admission, which we haven't really fully come to grips with us in our clinical strategy. So I think whilst it is important that we maintain our bed stock within the hospital, I think it is going to be very, very difficult to consume what is coming in terms of the population and the demands of care simply through a physical bed stock. I think understanding and being able to develop and use virtual wards will be absolutely key.
Simon, do you want to add any comment on this?
No, I agree. And I think Jim's grumpiness has rubbed off on me. I still think we're not using our beds as well as we could do in many settings as well, but it's something Jeremy and I and others are trying to work on, the engagement with the clinicians around how we can get that going. There's some of the wards turn over twice the rate of others, and that will be about what people are doing, but we need to do all of these things. And ultimately, I think that having another ward is I almost think it's a failing in a sense. It might be necessary, but it is so complex. And if we can get everything else going, then that's it. But we just can't live with 30 people waiting for a bed every morning for 4 months of the year.
Okay, I get that. That's been a really helpful discussion. I know there's always a temptation to just look for let's increase bed numbers as a solution when what we're really talking about is flow. And I know that the CPG is looking sensibly and properly and strategically at flow. But this feels like a focus that I suspect the board is going to want to have a look at, almost to help answer the question. I mean, the question about do we need more beds is a sub-question of how do we better manage flow in the years to come, and I'll be very keen for us to be engaged as a board in those wider discussions. Any more on what was, I thought, a brilliant, really terrific presentation and a really good, useful discussion.
And just to acknowledge Marcus Weatherly, who's the other Deputy Director, who is in NSEC managing the women's spreadsheet today, that's why he's not here, so it's just the world that we live in. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Then shall we move straight on? GMC, National Training Survey. This is another journey one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, I'm afraid it's... This is the annual report from the GMC survey, and I think it is essentially a good news report. We continue to have a very significant number of positive outliers and a small number of negative outliers. Yeah, very good. A smaller number of negative outliers. The numbers aren't quite as good as last year. I think, and what I'm hopeful of is if you look at the overall trend back from 2016, it has been relentlessly high, and we probably have peaked out, but I hope we're now on a plateau. We have risen the ranks within the region, and we are now only bested by the 2 mental health trusts, and we are getting the best outcomes in terms of our popularity with both trainees and trainers. There are issues that are highlighted, and the Education Board have a very good system for dealing with those, either individual comments or cases, but also those particular outlying areas which they're currently working through with the business units. And we'll use that to continue to maintain our position as a training organisation. We do expect that the numbers of the output from medical schools are going to increase. The postgraduate burden, the undergraduate and postgraduate burden is going to increase, which I think will be essential for our workforce plans. And we have a number of key roles placed strategically within our local educational structures in order to manage the changes that we'll need to go through over the next few years to accommodate that training workforce, because the more people that come and work with us, the better they like us and the more they apply for our jobs. So I think that's all very, very good news for the people of Northumberland and North Tyneside.
Because this feels like a positive report with no downsides, and where there are issues arising, it's pretty clear that they're being picked up and handled. Any comments? Yes, Hannah.
I'm just highlight, looking at the gastro bit, which has always been a bit of a problem. We were going to address it. Is it getting better, or is it still
Yeah, so I think the gastroenterology over the probably I would hope to see a better improvement next year. There have been issues with recruitment to the consultant workforce. We've actually now broken through most of those. I think the leaders workforce are in a different place. The rotas have been sorted out, and we would hope in due course that that will be reflected in the survey. But we shall see.
Okay. Any more? Are we happy to receive broadly positive report with evidence of work going on to tackle the areas of relative weakness, particularly noting further work to be done on gastro? Good. Then let's move on to Countess of Chester. Let's just think how best to handle this, because everybody in the room has been part of the previous presentations last night to governance. However, this is formal board, and I think what we are seeking to do is to assure ourselves that we are in as comfortable a position as we can. So look forward to your presentation, Jeremy, but you can assume that we actually had the full presentation yesterday. To highlight for us really the issues that we need to consider as to whether we feel as a board we are sufficiently assured.
So I'll with due deference to those who are new, I'll race through, but I'll be very, very happy to take any questions on detail.
There are no new. Everyone here, I think I'm right in saying, was with us last night. Everyone. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So in essence, the Countess of Chester, the problem was that there was a recognition of a pattern of harm by a particular individual that was raised by raised to the executive, and the issue that occurred particularly was that was not appropriately acted upon. So we are leading and training our senior team, and there are a number of people in this room who have responsibility for that, to think the unthinkable, because it can happen anywhere. We have a very strong and well-established series of values, and we embed those in our leadership development and our value-based recruitments on a day-to-day basis. We have a freedom to speak up system that is well established, that works well and reports directly to the chief executive, who keeps us as a group of executives thinking about the issues that are raised and, if necessary, thinking the unthinkable. We manage as a cohort in teams of individuals who share responsibility for all aspects of governance, and that is reproduced throughout all of our clinical organisation, all the way from specialties up to board. And these individuals, who are trained and recruit to the values that I've suggested, are responsible for all the escalations and intelligence from the staff groups and the reporting mechanisms. We have a well-established system of reporting that occur through all of those structures that I've spoken about, all the way from professional colleges, incidents, complaints, claims. We have a very, very strong safeguarding team that is well led, with a board that monitor that sort of thing. We have data monitoring. You've just heard about the medical examiner team. We have patient and staff experience and our website. So in short, we have an open culture with a willingness to change and act. All aspects contributing to patient safety are formally everyone's business, and we have knowledge and triangulation at many levels. We are developing newer ventures, particularly taking as sources of information from patients and patients' relatives, as have been briefly mentioned with call for concern. So I believe that we've got to focus on safety. We have an open reporting and listening culture. We monitor deaths, and we are curious about mortality. We take staff concerns seriously, we investigate them well, and we encourage reporting. And as we've heard today, hopefully that information makes its way up to this board, who have oversight, but also, as we've heard today, walk the floor.
Very good. I'll ask for questions or comments. And I think that's simply a sign that we've been talking about this for some time now, as we properly have. So I think that the summary is that when the Letley case and the Councillor Chester cases came to light, it was clear there were questions, significant questions for the NHS as a whole and ourselves as a foundation trust. We early on reviewed the arrangements that we had in place. We received partial assurance. We identified some areas that we wanted to dig further in and explore what we were doing. We raised those with governors initially and at board level. And following that, we've now had a much fuller assurance from Jeremy on behalf of his many colleagues of the range of activities that we are undertaking to ensure that as far as feasible, the incidents that occurred in the Countess of Chester would not happen here. And I think that the first thing I'd say is that was a really accessible presentation, which I think is very important, because often we move into, initial comments, whatever, but at times of feeling the need to be defensive. And I think I'm in a position to recommend that the board feels assured that all reasonable and proportional steps have been taken. Jeremy, you want to come back?
Well, I just, only because I had help.
Of course, not just you, of course. Is that the summary of us all? It's not Paul said, it's the board concluded. Good, excellent. Then thank you very much indeed for that, Jeremy. And let's move straight on. G2, patient letters update. Alistair and David, just again by way of introduction, this is something that has been discussed at many places. It's been talked about in safety and quality. It's a safety panel. Maybe you were about to say all this, but let me just say it. There's been reviewed at strategy level at IMT. What we're really looking for is to be assured as a board that the issue has been looked at through the different lenses, and that we have, again, as reasonable and proportionate a response as we can. Alistair?
Yeah, I'll give a quick summary and Dave will come in with the technical aspects. It's also a live issue, so I think there is an update to this rather than this being purely going over the previous ground. Okay. So, very brief summary. In spring of this year, we learned that a number of letters that we thought had been transmitted to primary care hadn't been, about 7,000. They had been sent to the patient, which is a great mitigation. As a result of that, it came to board, there was a PSERF and a whole set of initiatives in place. As a result of the PSERF, we've then looked at the rectification, so have the letters that we've sent on an ongoing basis been sent. And in September, it emerged that a further 7,000 letters between July 22 and July 23 hadn't been sent to primary care. I, along with Nikhil Premchand, looked at them from a clinical safety point of view. We've discussed that, it's gone through IMT. This is possibly the first time it's come through to board with that bit of information. And we are working through that with the ICB. They've gone to primary care, and that is now just about washed up. There have been no obvious safety issues. We've got live reporting from primary care if they're experiencing those. And again, those are letters that have been shared with patients. We are now going through, as part of the systematic review, any letters which should have been sent in paper format, which is quite unique because most trusts are only commenting on electronic ones. And we have a live issue where we're aware that some letters that we felt should have been posted as mail to practices. Again, we're assured that the patient copy of GUN have not gone. So they're just part of a live update. I spent the weekend looking at 702 letters. Of those, there were 8 where there is a potential for delay in care, but I don't think there's a potential for harm as a result of those. We are now in the process of going through the process by which we don't want to send them to practices in paper format if we can avoid it, because that just puts extra steps in. But we need to do that, and we need to get those to the primary care, just to make sure that they've got a complete patient record, but also if there are actions that are outdated or needing to be done, they are done. So that's a brief summary. Dave?
Yeah, just reassurance on the process we've gone through. So we've looked at the technical aspects of it. How are these going digitally? How are these going electronically? Once we were comfortable, we've got an end-to-end process on monitoring that. That's when we moved to the human factors process, which is are they sending letters in the mail, are they going to my people, and that's how this has come up. So there's just really reassurance on how the investigation's going from PSAFE all the way through those factors.
702 you did this weekend. Do you think that's the end of it?
That was a sample, so that certainly wasn't the totality of it. We're waiting for full clarity on that, but it's likely to be an order of at least 10 times that, so it was a sample. I think what we've got is a really robust process. So if we actually look at what's happened, we had a problem in spring, we did a full investigation, the PSAFE was a really useful part of that. As a result of the audits created within the PSAFE, we identified further delays in electronic ones, and that is now the process where it's happening live. So the first time you do it, you wash up everything that hasn't happened. It's now happening on a daily basis, so we won't have any backlogs from that point of view. And I think in terms of completing that cycle of being thorough, looking at those that we thought had been transmitted to paper. So I think if you want assurance, I think we are looking at all aspects of this as a result of that initial investigation. So whilst there is an ongoing theme, this is all washing through, and it's a result of that re-auditing process that we've instigated. So I think that's the prime insurance that the board would want.
Dave and then Andrew.
Yeah, just making changes from a digital point of view as well to change our system so that everything is sent digitally. So if you dictate a letter, you know it's going to go digitally via that system, which will be something else we're looking into swiftly as well.
Andrew?
Yeah, I guess, so we think we've got good assurance now from that thorough process that Alistair's talked about, so that's been good for us to go through, and I think that's well understood. I guess just to emphasise in all of this, we're kind of, the understanding of it's morphed a bit from kind of system problems that we've found and weeded out, and it's much more now around the kind of the business process, who's picking which drop downs, the way that users are actually interacting with the system. So it's just to emphasise the importance of David's business change team and actually getting out there, and now it's about understanding are people using this consistently, as well as have we reached out any system issues that were there. So I think that sort of shift in focus is quite important for us to have our eye on, not just for this, but for quite a lot of other things we're doing as well.
And the other lens we need to look through is the safety and quality. Are we content from the work that you guys have been doing that the processes that Alistair's instigated us assuring safety?
There's been a huge amount of hard work on in this to think what else we could actually do, and as far as we know, there's no harm.
And I think the benefit of this process and going now towards more of the human factors, we're looking for things, and that's a good thing. So I suspect we might not have seen the end of it because we keep looking. I think we could easily have done the process, the IT element of it, and just closed it off, which happened.
Well, when the issue first came out, we maybe felt a little bit too self-satisfied that what had happened in some other places we felt couldn't have happened here, or we would have picked it up earlier. And what's become clear as we've looked into it is we haven't been immune to the IT problems that have affected every trust in the country, and we're progressively getting better at getting on top of the system issues, now getting on top of the human issues, being confident on the safety implications of it. It's a bit like Lepley, isn't it? I don't think we can ever say it couldn't happen again, and we can't say there are still no skeletons to fall out of the cupboard. But I think what we're hearing is that we've got a very robust set of systems for following this issue through. And I'm sure we'll capture that in minutes, which will be helpful, I think. Are we good to go? Then I've just lost my papers. So just as we wanted to get onto the nice paper, these are always fun ones, aren't they? Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go through it in any great deal because it's quite a long paper and it's a bit of a double helping this time because there's Q1 and Q2. So I think it's quite a difficult national context around communications and perception nationally for the NHS at the moment. You've seen lots of quite challenging and difficult media coverage generally for the NHS in the country, but I think if you have a look at the dashboards in here and the kind of levers weed control, we haven't quite seen that yet in our area. In fact, on the periods that these cover, it's been really good media coverage. So things like the One Show on BBC One, ITV News, all the local press has been positive to this stage. So things are holding up quite well, and it's reflecting all the great work going on around the organisation. Quite a lot of the time of the team's been sucked into supporting the industrial action process and informing the public and staff about that. So we're hoping that isn't as much of an issue in the next couple of periods. And we've reframed the feedback slightly from channel so that again it supports and looks at the big signals and how we're promoting and engaging on those as well. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that report. Steve.
Thanks, Ross. I was just curious, as we've heard quite a bit about the patient's charter and a lot of the ambitions and hopes for that. Are the communications team intrinsically involved with that piece of work, and not just plans on how it's designed but how it's rolled out? And I was also hoping that that would include the patients and carers.
We absolutely are, and I've attended them personally for the last couple. So it was a really interesting session last time, and just for sort of reassurance on that, Joe and I, and probably come on at the next report, and our teams work really closely together on all these kind of issues, because we know that the sort of broadcast and the communications element is so closely entwined with the perception piece and the work that Joe and her team do on engagement. So the quick answer is yes, we are.
Thank you.
Happy to receive? Lovely, thank you. And that's, I always look forward to seeing you, so that's great. Then on to a bit less exciting. There's a paper, but just equally important, stakeholder engagement.
Yeah, this one follows quite nicely, and again, pleased to say we're compliant on this, and we'll bring this back to you occasionally. Some really excellent work by Joe's team and the foundation team as well, and really integrating those two parts of the organisation together to make sure that we're able to really engage with all our different stakeholders. And one thing I would just pull out is that we're really trying to rebuild the face-to-face element since the end of COVID. And a lot of the corporate stuff we used to do, obviously during COVID we weren't able to do, and people in public got quite used to virtual methods, which have a place and have been very useful but don't quite replicate a lot of the stuff we're doing face-to-face. So over the summer we've really focused on getting out and about and visiting various community fairs and fates and that kind of thing. And we've just restarted this month some of the community conversations where we're out meeting public and stakeholders face-to-face, and that's been much more effective, I think. So we are having a real concerted drive towards that. Not instead of, but as well as, so just to give it a bit more of an asymmetric approach to it all, I think.
I'm sure we all welcome the increase in the amount of face-to-face engagement over this time, and doubtless welcome the assurance that we're certainly meeting the CQC expectations on this. Any questions or comments? We're happy to receive that. Then we're into a series of assurance reports that have been properly chewed over by board committees. So we only really need to get any comments by exception, as it were. First of all, from Marion, the Nursing and Midwifery Staff and Assurance Report.
Thank you. I think they'll all have read the papers, but 3 things I would like to just say from October. Vacancies are down, recruitment team working with other teams have been very successful in that. Sickness has gone up, and we've discussed that earlier today. Everybody's in process. Just the staff moves has gone up again, so that's something that we know that that really is something we want to really reduce, and it does involve staff experience. So working on that, but apart from that, happy to take any questions.
Does the report speak for itself? Yeah, good. Next up is Jeremy, Learning from Death, quarter 2.
Yeah, so just to note, thanks very much to the information team. So there's a new format in the dashboard coming through, and the main item that I've raised with safety and quality is to ask the business units to improve the timeliness. So the time taken to undertake reviews, particularly when those recommended by the medical examiner, we're asking them to bring that forward by approximately 3 months.
And from SQI point of view, nothing to raise?
Nothing to raise.
No,
Gone
okay.
through all of those.
Good. Any from anybody else? Corporate safety and quality, Bijou?
I think we've gone through all of these
We have.
measures through governance yesterday, and I think we've heard it through Simon's presentation earlier today, so nothing more to add over what's in the report.
Any final questions? I think we've all had plenty of chances to chew over this one. Then Paul then sent his apologies, but we've got the finance. Who's going to do that? Jim?
Yeah. Again, we've done this several times this week in PIP and in governance, etc. It's a strong financial position overall, no real concerns. Been through the financial reset recently with the ICB, and again, continue to be on track with an actually slightly improved position. So, other than that, pretty straightforward.
Good. Happy just to note? Excellent. We're into the sweep up agenda for the next meeting. I bet it'll be changed quite soon, but for now, nothing particular to add to that. Review of the meeting, how's it gone? Nodding heads. Any shakes? Any comments? And thank you very much indeed. I've enjoyed it very much. We haven't received any questions from the public, have we? In which case, colleagues, thank you very much indeed for attending. We'll see most of you, firstly in the corporate trustee meeting in just a few minutes' time, and then in the private board meeting at 1:00. Thank you all.